My name is Jack Houston. I was originally born in Rochester, New York, and moved to Arundequite there. And then I've been down here in South Carolina for about 21 years now. This is 2008, I believe. And I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 and went to Parris Island. And I did very well with a rifle there, with a Garand rifle. And I was asked to come back as a rifle range coach. And after about 4 months, they had what they called a combat list. And I signed up for that, and they let me go after 4 months. Usually you were supposed to stay for 6. And I joined the replacement unit, and we went over to Guadalcanal and for training there to form the 6th Division. And we trained there for quite a while. We got a lot of training in the boondocks. That was kind of nasty out there. But as we got down to the living in the tents and that sort of thing, it really wasn't as bad at all as it was for the guys that were there originally. And we were able to swim a great deal and everything there right on the ocean. You had to swim with your boondockers on because of the coral. You couldn't you couldn't very well go swimming with your bare feet, or you'd be cut to ribbons. And I remember one time when we were out in the boondocks and it started to rain and we were in our foxholes and everything. I had my shelter half over me, and it started to rain and I fell asleep, and what woke me up was water running in my ear. And I never forgot that. I didn't like that much at all. And anyhow, while we're out there, sometimes you'd have to get water, you know, and I ended up with about 10 or 12 canteens and went in where the Seabees were. They were stationed not too far away, and they had what they call the Lister bags full of water. And so I asked them if it was okay, and God, they filled us up with everything I wanted. And then as I was leaving, the guy said, "Wait a minute." He says, "We really appreciate all you guys are doing and everything, you know." So he ended up giving me two boxes of candy and a half a bunch of bananas to take back to the guys. I thought, well, they must have appreciated something, but I don't know what it was. So anyhow, after Guadalcanal, we shipped out. We were on our way to Okinawa. And we got up into Ulithi, and that's where we changed from the personnel boats, the big boats, onto the LSTs. And I just found out recently, my brother was in the Marine Corps as a Marine Corps pilot. He flew night fighters, he flew Hellcats. And he was over Ulithi flying night cover while I was down in the ships below there, and I never realized that before. That just came up in our conversation real lately. And anyhow, when we were transferring from the big boats over to the LSTs, we got into a Higgins boat, you know, and we went down the rope ladders and got into the Higgins boat, and we just about got started to go over to the LSTs. And right at my feet, a geyser of water came flying right up in the air. And I looked over and I said to the coxswain, who he's the only one on the boat, I said, "Is that supposed to be like this?" You know, knowing it wasn't. And he said, "Oh my God," you know, and he whipped off his T-shirt, rolled it in a ball, stuffed it in there, and he says, "Stand on that." So I stood on it all the way over to, and it was quite a ways to go over there. And that's how we got over to the LST, me standing on his T-shirt. There must have been a plug in the bottom that blew somewhere. I don't know what caused it to begin with. But anyhow, we got over there, and I often wondered how he got back without somebody standing on it. So anyhow, we got on the LSTs, and then we made our way up to Okinawa. And when we got to Okinawa, getting ready for the invasion, it was April 1st. And I looked at the battleships next to us, and we were already in these, like, it wasn't a Higgins boat, it was, what they call them, some kind of a mobile boat anyhow. And we were making circles out there before we all went in at once to land, I was watching the battleship right next to us. It was very close. And when all those 16 inches went off at one time, it actually rocked the boat. And I didn't believe that was possible, alone the weight of those things. It was incredible. And anyhow, we went into shore, and the only shots that were fired were shots that we fired before we got there. There wasn't anything, there was no opposition at all. And we went on and we moved right out immediately. And we went over to, there was a road over there, and then we started up the road, and we ended up going about 3 days worth, what they expected us to be. By 3 or 4 days, we were there in 1 day because there was no opposition whatsoever. And anyhow, as we were moving out a little later there, shells started coming in on us, and I really think they were Navy shells. I don't think anybody else was shooting at us at the time because they were coming from the other direction. And they started exploding in the trees around us at first, and the first one that came fairly close to us, I saw a big shell hole, and I thought I was, reasonably athletic. First time I saw that, I leaped right for the shell hole, and I landed right on top of my buddy. And I said, "How the hell did you get here so fast?" He says, "I was on Guam." So I believed him. So anyhow, we moved out further after that, and we went so far that we overextended the supply lines, and they made us come back a ways, and that didn't make us very happy. But anyhow, we got back by with this one hill, and they started dropping mortars in. That was actually Japanese because there was nobody else there. And so we started digging hard and fast about that time. And during that, the mortar attack really didn't amount to much. It stopped, and then there wasn't any more. But while we were digging in, one fella hit the other fella on the head with his shovel. I mean, he really hurt him bad. And they sent him off to the hospital down by the ocean. And a couple of days later, he rejoins us, and he's got a huge white bandage on his head. He couldn't even get his helmet on, and he was just as white as the bandage was all over, And I said to him, "How in the devil would they let you go looking like this?" And he said, "Let me go." He said, "I took off." He said, "A guy could get killed down there." And there were kamikaze planes were coming in around the ships right around where he was staying and everything, And I had to laugh, though. The humor of the situation was, how often would you think a guy would return to the front lines for safety? I thought that was rather funny. So anyhow, we started moving north. We secured the whole north end of the island eventually. Well, we started moving north. And as we stopped the second day, we dug in. And at one point, I was in there at night with my foxhole mate, and he started shaking like crazy, And he said, "Oh my God, Jack," he says, "I think my malaria's back." And I said, "Well, I don't know what you got, Goat." He said, "But I got it too, because I'm shaking just as bad as you are." I think we had a bad case of being cold and scared, and that's what it was. So anyhow, as we stopped at that place, there was some, what do you call them? There were some caves that were dug out for the Japanese. They'd already dug them out and everything. So some of our guys stayed in there, at night. And there was no lights in there or anything, but they just went in and stayed. It was warmer and everything, So the first thing when we wake up in the morning, we heard a couple of explosions. And here 2 Japanese blew themselves up in the morning for whatever reason. I mean, that's what they did. And the guys started thinking about it, and they'd been sleeping with them all night in there. So that was another kind of a funny one, I thought. And we continued on up to the northern end of the island. And in fact, we went right to the very tip, and there I nearly lost my life. It was, there were two airplanes, Jap airplanes came flying along the northern end. And right behind them came a Hellcat, and he came down behind this one plane. They were old planes. They weren't modern at all. They were probably observation planes. And anyhow, he came down behind this one Jap plane, and he started to fire, and the Jap plane just did a little drop. He just dropped down low, and a Hellcat flew right over him. And but behind him was a Corsair coming in, and you could just see he had his flaps down. He was mushing in and going as slow as he could to keep up the speed of the plane in front of him. And he shot him down, you know. That was the good part. The bad part was the plane nearly landed on my head. And I'm not joking. I mean, this thing was coming right down for us. In the last maybe 4 or 5 seconds, it just veered off and crashed not too far away from us. And I don't want to say I was shook up, nor my foxhole mate, but we never even walked over to crash. We'd seen enough of that already. And the other plane kept going down, and another Corsair got behind him. And we had a machine gun out on the point, and you could just see the Corsair had tracers going into that plane, and the machine gun on the point had tracers. They met at that plane, really. It was quite a sight, and it just dropped down into the ocean. No flames or anything, but it just dropped down, and that was it. You know? So anyhow, one good thing we had up there, we found a big iron kettle. It was huge, almost about half the size of those ones you see in the movies. So they're going to eat the people, you know. And anyhow, we were able to get rid of our fleas. I mean, there were terrible fleas on Okinawa most of the time. We used to go through and catch our seams of our clothing and, you know, go through and kill them as much as you could. But then we were able to boil our clothes and really got rid of them for a while. And while we were up there, we had about a 3-day scouting mission. We got into a boat and we went around to a little town called, I think it was Aha. And that was the northernmost point of the island. And so we landed there, and then we walked back, and that was our mission, just to see what was going on there. And we never saw anything, opposition or anything like that. In fact, we never saw any live Okinawans. There was one dead one there. It was laying there. I think he must have got shot by a plane because there was nobody around. I mean, none of us people had ever been up there or anything. And we got their 3-day patrol turned into 4 days. And we only had rations for 3 days, so I didn't forget that one either. But we did find a little pig, and the guy made up some stew, and that tasted very good. So then we were transferred back. We were relieving the army. They'd been down on the south end where all the action was. And so we went on down to the south part, and then that's when some of the action started down there. When we first started to move out, I was given the honor of being the lead scout, and that really wasn't an honor. And anyhow, I was out in front of the whole regiment, and we were on a big hill, and so they gave me a couple of flares, smoke grenades, and one was red and one was green, and there was another fellow way, a couple hundred yards to the right, and another one a couple hundred yards to the left. And we were in front of the whole outfit, and we just went out and you were like bait, I guess. And anyhow, nothing was happening, so we just kept going as far as we could, and then I threw the smoke grenade, and then everybody started coming in, And as we moved out, this got to be, I don't know, around the 11th of May, I think. And we went across this river, and then we came into kind of a valley, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. It was just, we were in open fields, so to speak, and no cover, and these machine gun bullets were just whip cracking over all of us. It was just, it was not good. And I thought, geez, if I'm going down, I want to go down doing something. So I stuck a rifle grenade on there, and I fired that at a little pump house, or whatever it was up there. I didn't know if there was anybody in there or what, but I don't know if it did any good or not. But I felt better about doing something rather than just laying there getting shot. So for some reason, all of a sudden that stopped, and we were able to continue, and we got up a ways, and then we came under fire again, and so we moved behind this knoll, and that became our command post for the rest of the time I was there. And so the next day we started going down this valley, and the first thing I saw was a Jap running toward a tank that was out. I was back quite a ways. I was about probably 300 yards, 200, 300 yards back. And I jumped in a ditch when everybody started getting shot around me. And I just started shooting at any bushes or something. You didn't see anybody. You were shooting at anything that looked a little different. And as I saw this Japanese running toward one of the tanks, he had a satchel charge with him. And it wasn't the satchel charge didn't go off, I don't believe, but something hit him, and it was like he disintegrated, really. It was just 1 moment he was there, and the next minute there was nothing. And so that was my introduction to the beginning of that fight. And so anyhow, we were stuck out in the middle there for quite a while, and then some of the tanks started coming back. They lost several tanks immediately through mines, and it was just a perfect defensive place that they had set up. They set up everything there, and they had the range and everything. But I got hit by mud from artillery about 3 different times that didn't go off, thank God. That was too close, and at other times at Eurasia, well, that was later, but anyhow, we started coming back to that knoll, and everybody was starting to get shot up again. And the only cover we had was the tread tracks from the tanks going through. It had rained a lot and everything, and they had given us just a little bit of cover, that we got down in there. And they started shooting the packs off our backs, but they weren't hitting the guys. So some sergeant in the back yelled up, and he said, "Hey, each of you cut the pack off the guy in front of you so you don't expose yourself, And we did that, and my gosh, it worked pretty good. We were able to get back behind one of the tanks stopped, and we got behind the tank, and we were making our way back to this knoll. And so as we got back to the knoll, the guys started to peel off and run back there, and about every other one was getting shot. And when it came my turn, I started running, and something whacked me in the leg, and I thought, whoa, and it was my rifle stock. A bullet had gone through the stock right in the butt plate, and it smacked me into my leg and almost knocked me down. And so I thought, I don't want to run this direction anymore, so I took off sideways and jumped to the ditch. And then I came back in later after things quieted down. But the kid in front of me, I saw him take 2 right around the kidneys or something, and he never made it at all. And another fellow, while we were coming back, this lieutenant had a light machine gun in his hand. His name was Dale Bear. And he had a light machine gun in his hand. Today you would call him Rambo, really. He looked just like that, right out in the open. And what he was firing at, I don't know, but it was really quite heroic. Well, he got hit again as he was coming in too, running back to the knoll. When I got back there, I looked, and I had bullet holes through both sleeves of my dungaree jacket, my wool shirt on both sides, and of course the one that went through the rifle. So my rifle was disabled, so my buddy saw a guy going by and out in the back. It was combat fatigue. You could tell he was shaking for not, shells that land quite a ways away, and he was all shook up. And anyhow, he went out and essentially he stole his rifle and he brought it back, and we took mine and his and put it together, and it turned out pretty good. I had a rifle again anyhow. So while we were behind that knoll, two of my buddies there got up. There was like a little path along this knoll, and you could see over the top of it. And I saw them get up there, and they both had their .45s, and they were shooting at something out on the road, and I thought, we just got kicked out of there. And I yelled at them, and I was a PFC. I had no control over myself or anybody else, but this just seemed kind of stupid, And I said, guys, we just got kicked out of there. What the hell are you doing? Why don't you get down, And, they laughed and they got down. So a little while later, they got up there again. And I yelled at them again. And I said, what's the matter with you? So anyhow, they laughed and they got down. They got up a third time. And I don't know what, I was incensed for some reason or other. I just thought it was a stupid play. And I walked over to him, and I was almost as close as, I bet you I was within 4 or 5 feet of the guy. And I started to say, what the devil's the matter with you guys? I never got it all out when there was a splat. And he got hit right through the neck, and it caught the other fellow right between the eyes. And he did a complete backward somersault, and the blood kept coming right out of there. His heart was still pumping, and it sounded just like it took an upside-down milk bottle full of milk or water, and it was just going glub, glub, glub. Something you'll never forget. I mean, that was a sickening sight, really. And so I called a corpsman for this guy that got hit through the neck. And he asked me to get some stuff for him, which I did. And he said something to me when he got shot, but I didn't hear it, and I didn't pay any attention to him. And I ran into him in China many, many months later, and he said he owed me an apology. And I said, what for? He said, you didn't hear what I said? He called me a bad name. He thought I shot him. I'm coming at him, I'm angry, my rifle was in my hand and everything, and he thought that I shot him, I said, I always wondered how many people, he said it took 2 weeks to figure out that it wasn't me, and I said, I always wondered how many people he told that I shot him before he found out it wasn't me. But, so anyhow, that was a bad thing. And so then we started out the next day, we started out moving down this valley again. And again, we got kicked out and came back. And overnight, I was put out as next to a machine gun for a little protection on his left flank. And that was one of the worst nights of my life. The flares, they had constant illumination most nights while we were there. And the heads of the flares kept coming down all around me all night long. And I don't know what they weighed, but you don't want to have one of them hit you. And they'd come into the ground, and the ground was quite soft from the rain and everything. It was like jello, and actually it shook, it shook the ground. That's how close they were coming. And it just went on all night long, I say, one guy who was very happy when the dawn broke that day, I'll tell you. So then our next mission, we were supposed to go over and help give covering fire for another company that was coming up on our left flank. And I got over there, and I was all alone by this point, and there weren't too many of us left already. And got over there, and there was a group of guys at the bottom of the hill, but there was nobody up on top. And I thought, geez, that's a funny way to give covering fire. And so I got up on the top, and the first thing I looked over there, I saw a Jap running down the side of a hill. So I took 2 cracks at him, and before the second one had hardly got out of my rifle, the bullet went past my ear, so literally it hurt. It was that close without hitting you, you know. And so I decided that'd be a nice time to go down and join my friends down the bottom of the hill there. I finally realized why they were all down there. When I got down there, the guys said they lost 3 guys shot right between the eyes up there. I felt they could have imparted that information a little sooner. And anyhow, while we were sitting there, I asked one of the guys for a cigarette, and he said, "Houston, you don't smoke." And I said, I do now. And I really did start smoking right at that point. And so anyhow, we sat there, and then some more fellows came over, and then this Major Courtney came by. And he started talking about the hill out in front of us. It was called Sugarloaf. And anyhow, the way he was talking, I didn't like what was going on very much. It sounded like a night attack or something, you know. So the Marine Corps had one staple rule at night for night fighting. He said, if it moves, shoot it. And I figured, you know, it doesn't matter if you get shot by a Marine or a Japanese, you're just a shot. So anyhow, sure enough, that was his idea, you know. So we're getting all together. I think there was about 26 or 7 of us. And we were getting ready to go, and I had it right on the tip of my tongue. I was expecting him to say, you know, "Take off, men," like they usually do. And I was all set to say, "After you, sir." And the Major said, "Follow me, men." And he went out first, you know, and I humbly followed the man. And so we just got around the corner of this hill, and the machine gun opened up right over our heads, really. But they couldn't get down far enough. We were too close underneath them. They couldn't get down to fire at those of us close to them. So one of the machine gunners in the back, I heard he threw a couple of grenades up there, and that was the end of that. So we got over to the Sugarloaf Hill safely, as far as I know, the whole bunch. You hear different stories later on, but as far as I know, we all got over there. And we were all assigned positions on the hill, you know, the Major said, "Go here, go there," and so forth. And so Rocco Polari and I we were way down toward the rear on the bottom, and we dug in. And it was easy to do because there are a lot of shell holes in that thing, really. It was just a little hill. It didn't amount to much, really. And while we were in there, the guys up in front of us, he'd taken out all his BAR magazines from his Browning automatic rifle and laid them alongside his foxhole. Well, we started getting hand grenades and all kinds of things coming over there, and one of them landed right in his BAR magazines, and they flew all over the place, and one of them flew into our foxhole. And Rocco, he just put both feet over it and shoved it into the ground, and he says, "Is that one?" He thought it was a grenade. And I thought that was very instinctively brave of him, really. I mean, to do that. And so anyhow, all of a sudden we could see a Jap come up over the top of the hill. He had his helmet and a little stick of wood sticking up like a tree branch, you know. And I said to Rocco, "Take a look at that," you know. And we started to raise our rifles, and somebody else already had shot at him, and he disappeared. So the Major decides we're going to have a banzai of attack of our own. He said, "Come on, we're going to go up there, we'll throw all our grenades, and then we'll go over the top," you know. Well, we start up, and I was right behind the Major, and we got to, about 7/8 of the hill, up the hill, and a Jap just scooted out of the cave right at our feet, right to the left side. He banged his grenade on his helmet and threw it right between us, you know, and I don't think either one of us were within 4 feet from the darn thing. And I yelled, "Grenade," you know, and I threw myself backwards, and it never went off. I think the guy was in such a hurry to get rid of it that he didn't arm it properly or something, you know. So anyhow, the Major never even moved. I don't know what happened there, but anyhow, I landed on top of a machine gunner behind me someplace, and he had nasty things to say about my family and what the hell was I think I was doing laying on top of him. Like I said, to be honest, I was trying to save my ass. That's what I was trying to do. And so anyhow, I kind of struggled to get back up again. And as I started going up, I wasn't right behind the major. There was a little easier path to the right. And I saw him. I was just a little over to the right and behind him when he went over the hill, and he looked like a recruiting poster. I got to say that, really, the guy. He says, "Come on, men," he says, "I see them. They're thicker than flies." And he's going over the hill with his, whatever he had, carbine or 45, going over the top of the hill. And he looked for all the world like a hero, no joke about it, you know. And so anyhow, I went over to the right a little ways, and first thing I saw, I stood right on the very top of the hill, and I looked down, and right below me was a cave, about 30 feet below me, and then out of that cave, next to it, was a trench, and it went all the way down to the road. And as I got up to the top, the first thing I saw was Japs getting out of this trench and running across the road. And as I got up higher, I saw they were all lined up, crawling all the way back to the cave right below my feet there, you know. So God, I just started shooting. I went through 2 clips, and I just started a third. And then the whole top of the hill blew up. I don't know if it was artillery or what, but we all got thrown all over the place, you know. So I figured I got about 18 of them before that top of that hill blew up. And I got to say, I was exultant at that point, because after they'd, you know, people might think that's bad, but they'd knocked the heck out of our people, killed many of my own platoon and everything. And I really felt good about what I was doing at that point. And so anyhow, I jumped in a foxhole there with a friend of mine. Somehow he got a bayonet through his leg. And a friend of mine, my foxhole buddy, or my BAR assistant there, I was his assistant. He started yelling from down below my name, and I said, "Yeah, Joe." And I said, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah." And he did that about 3 times, and I knew he was in trouble. So I got down, started to go down to him, and as I'm running down there, a darn knee mortar went off in a shell hole right next to me, and it gave me impetus. Blew me practically down the hill. And I just caught, mostly it was gravel and slivers, evidently. I didn't even know that at the time, of that mortar in my right side and so forth. Didn't incapacitate me at all. And I got down to Joe, and he'd been hit through the back and arm. And so I patched him up, and he took it well. And while I was sitting there with him, this sergeant came along, and he said he needed somebody on top of the hill. And I'd been there. I didn't like it. But anyhow, I took Joe's BAR, and I took my rifle, and I went back up to the top. And there wasn't any hole or anything up there, but there was a depression there, you know. And so I laid down in this depression, and I started looking around, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of artillery came in, and that was quite interesting. I mean, I could see it coming in from the coast, and it looked like tracers. And I said, why would they have tracers on artillery? But I guess it was friction, probably, wouldn't you say? I don't know. And anyhow, they did a hell of a job. They hit all over the place. I mean, they really made the area. I'm sure they all got in their holes when that was going on. But anyhow, I laid there after that, and 3 Japs came walking down the road like it was Sunday morning. Just I could hear them talking for a long ways away. And they started, as they got close, I started to fire at them, you know. And just as I started firing, the flare went out. And as I started firing, and right at that point, we had a term, I don't want to get nasty, but we had a term, sometimes we used it for us and sometimes we used it for them, and this time it was them. We called it shitting and getting. When people shooting at you, you're moving fast, you know. And so anyhow, that's what they were doing at the point. And I don't think I hit any of them. The only thing that did was it got a machine gunner on the other hill over there. He saw the flare of my rifle, I'm sure, and he started just shooting right at where I was. And though he couldn't quite hit me, he was literally blowing my cover away. I mean, as I say, I wasn't in a hole, it was just depression. He just kept throwing dirt over my back and my face and everything, you know. And man, I mean, it was just a matter of minutes before there wasn't going to be any cover there, you know? So I decided I better get out of there when I could. So a little shortly there, another flare went out, and before the other one illuminated, I started to run for this ditch, or run for this cover anyhow. And I got to this thing, and it was like a little plateau, and I thank God I had presence of mind enough to say, look out below, I'm coming down. And I threw myself off of this thing, and I landed on all fours, and I looked up, and here there was an M1 about 1 foot from my forehead, you know. So I cursed at them because not that I was mad at them, but I wanted them to know that I was an American, and I didn't think they'd figure a Jap would know how to curse like that, you know. So finally they accepted me, thank heavens, and they said they didn't know there was anybody up there, you know, so naturally they were going to shoot anything that was moving. If I hadn't yelled, I think I wouldn't be here. And so anyhow, as I wandered away from there, I started wandering over a little further onto the hill and over to the left, and there were 4 guys leaning up against this knoll. And it was, you know, it kind of dipped down, and one was at the higher point, and I thought they were sleeping, and I thought, how in the hell can anybody sleep through something like this, you know? Well, anyhow, a shell landed not too far away, and the sand and gravel started draining from beneath the top guy's shoulder and arm, and as I watched, it just kept raining out, and then he flopped over and hit the guy next to him, and he hit the man next to him, and he hit the man next to him. It was like dominoes going down. And I could see they were all dead. I had no idea. I don't know what caused it. They didn't look, I didn't see any blood or anything like that to speak of, you know. And that sight really sickened me. So I wandered a little down the hill, and I got between a tree and the hill, and there was a little hole in there. So I got in there and I sat down. I didn't see anybody I knew or anything, what was going on. I didn't have any idea at this point. And in this hole, there was a hole, a real hole between my legs that went down into the cave. And I didn't want to move around very much because if there was light coming from the flares and then you interrupted that, I could just see a bayonet coming up through that thing, and I didn't need that, you know. So anyhow, I stayed there most of the rest of the time, and come morning, they started in, of course they had some going during the night, but come morning they started in with the knee mortars again, and you could hear the cough. They were just on the other side of the hill. And you could hear the cough, and then you could catch the knee mortars right at their apex. And you could actually see when they were coming down. Well, I saw this one, and it looked like it was going to land right in my lap. And so I'm going to jump over the tree on the other side and, try to save myself. And I couldn't move. My legs from my hips down were absolutely dead. And it was either divine intervention or poor circulation, I don't know what. But in the end, I was glad for it because that knee mortar landed right exactly where I was going to jump to. It didn't land me. So the tree absorbed all the bad stuff, you know. So anyway, a little while later, somebody came up and said, the 22nd Regiment, that was us, he said, the 22nd is relieved. So I finally got up and got some circulation going, and I started down the hill, and I see this young kid, honest to God, he didn't look 16 years old. And he had a little revolver in his hand. It couldn't have been bigger than a .32. And I said to this kid, I said, "Where's your rifle?" And he said, "I don't know, sir." And I was 18 years old. He must have thought I was an officer or something, right? But he was scared, you know. So anyhow, I said, "Here," I had both my rifle and the BAR, and I said, "Take this and hang on to it, for God's sakes, you know." So I got down to the hill, and I started walking back toward the CP, and there was a little ditch through there. And the first thing I saw was our company runner, another kid. I don't think he was 16. He was shot right between the eyes. That had happened a few days before. And honestly, all of a sudden, I just was so tired. I had 3 days that I hadn't hardly any sleep whatsoever. I lost 3 packs in 3 days. I was just tired, and everything just seemed to be suddenly like I was in slow motion. And as I was getting back near the CP there, a Jeep-type vehicle pulled up with a couple of racks of rockets on them. And they pulled up and they fired, and boy, they fired a bunch of them, but one of them didn't work right. It just flopped up in the air, and it's going to come down right just a little ways from me. And honest to God, in my mind, I'm thinking, if I go down, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back up again. And I didn't go down, and the rocket didn't go off, so I was glad it didn't work on both ends. You know? So I got back to the CP, and I no sooner got there were 2 other fellows there, Rocco Polari and Dennis Del Cranberry. And no sooner had I got there than he said, "Well, get your gear, we're going to move down to the coast." And I said, "How are we going to get there?" And he said, "Well, we're going to walk." And I said, "I don't know about these fellas." I said, "But I ain't going to make it." And I thought he'd say to me, "Well, crap out and catch up to us when you get some rest, you know." And anyhow, instead, he rode up the 3 of us. We were the last 3 riflemen in the company. And he rode up the 3 of us and sent us back to battalion aid. In a matter of hours, I was off the island. They took me out to a hospital ship. And I thought I was very, very lucky, because I know a lot of guys that were wounded, and they went back into action after a few days, you know, if there were minor wounds. And all I wanted was a little sleep. But I was really fortunate. That was the end of my battle on Okinawa in Sugarloaf Hill. And I was glad it was over. So then they took us on a hospital ship, and I celebrated my 19th birthday on the hospital ship going down to Saipan. And we spent some time there. I don't remember how long we were there. Probably wasn't a month, maybe about 3 weeks. And then the division was reforming on Guam. And they gave us the choice of either going back to Hawaii and joining another outfit, you know, being reassigned, I guess is what they called it, or joining your own outfit. And naturally, I wanted to join my own outfit, you know. So I got back to my own outfit, and there were only about 7 of us left from my platoon through the whole company. So that, you know, I didn't see a lot of people I knew as I was hoping for, you know. But so after that, we did work detail. I worked hard on Guam. I mean, we unloaded ship, bringing back stuff from Okinawa and everything, and we unloaded ship on us 18 hours a day sometimes for a week or better. And all you did was sleep and eat, you know, I mean, work and eat and sleep, and there was not much sleep, really. And so we got, then we were assigned to go to China. And we went up there, and our real job was to send the Japanese occupation troops in China back to Japan. They had surrendered, and so I was briefly in a prison camp there with them just as a guard, and what we usually did was we'd go in and we'd load up trucks with the prisoners, take them down and put them on LSTs, and then they'd take them back over to Japan. That was our major work there, and we also accepted the surrender. That was supposed to be the big part of it. We accepted the surrender of the Japanese troops there in Tsingtao. That was the name of it. It's now Qingdao. And we spent almost 6 months up there, and that was really good duty for us as far as when you had good food and, entertainment and everything. It was very nice. And so then I finally came back to the States in about May of 1945, or 46. After I got out, I worked for an industrial engraving company and started as an apprentice and ended up superintendent after about 39 years. I was acting as a point for the 22nd Regiment, and the reason I got that, I had volunteered earlier. There was a machine gun giving some problems up there, and so my squad leader asked for volunteers, so I said I'd go, and we went up there, and by the time I got there, the problem had been solved. So I think the reason I got to be the point man was because he asked me if I wanted to be the point man, and I agreed. I mean, I volunteered. He knew I volunteered before, so he figured I'd volunteer again. So that was how I ended up. I did, just before I left the top of the hill, there was a general there. I don't know who he was. I have no idea. And anyhow, I wasn't feeling too bad about it, Go see what happens, it happens. Anyhow, he grabbed me by the shoulder and patted me, and he said, "Go with God, son." That's when I began to worry, So then that's when they gave me these smoke grenades, and I went down and was out in front of everybody for quite a period of time. One was red and one was green, and if there was nothing, you ran into nothing and didn't see anything, you'd throw the red one.
The red?
Yes, that surprised me too. So I threw the red one, and so did the other guys. There was nothing there, I was going through basic training when we got on mess duty, and so that was our first day in there, and the cooks were, assigning people things, and they said, "Any of you fellas know anything about horses?" And I did, I'd ridden horses, and there was a stables right near me, and I used to clean up over there, and we rode the horses and everything. And in fact, I guided some of them through the park, when they had their people going there. And so I said, "I do," He says, "Okay," he says, "You're assigned to ride the range." So after everything was all over, he says, you can leave as soon as you're done, which sounded like you'd leave before some of the other fellas. Well, we were the last ones there, those of us assigned to that, and it was, taking like Brillo pads and that, and scraping the oven until they were clean. Believe me, they were the last ones there. We were the last ones there. One of my worst memories of boot camp was blisters. I never got a pair of shoes that fit me. And finally, it just got so bad, you'd have to go down to sick bay, and they'd break them, and they'd paint it up with something, and you'd go back to work. That was the way it went, But there wasn't much respite, I'll tell you that, for that business, When we reached Guadalcanal, some of the fellows had already been in action on Guam, Roy Namur, and that sort of thing, and the 22nd had. And so there were some real veterans in there, but they accepted us. We just joined together, like, as they say, the band of brothers. That's how we became, really. It was no, there's always a few guys that don't get along, but that's automatic. but we just got along with everybody. They never seemed to look down on you or call you rookie or anything like that. It was cohesion, really, right off the bat. The officers, I respected all of them. They were all almost to a man. They were great officers, really. And we didn't have, for quite a period of time, and it was heavenly, we didn't have a platoon sergeant. So we really didn't get up in the morning like most guys. And when we finally got one, we didn't like it. He'd be around in the morning as reveille, you know. And okay, get up there, you know, yelling. I was young and gung-ho, and I was too dumb to be scared, really. But I learned quickly. Yeah. But I just, you know, guys just start getting hit around you too, you know. Then you dive for cover. That's all I remember. I couldn't speak for anyone else. They were smarter than I was to begin with, perhaps. I always ran kind of bent over. I see some of the guys who are running, they were, you know, full up and they were getting whacked in the shoulders and in the head and everything else. It came from that mortar shell, as I say. It was mostly like rocks and some fine.
Yeah.
I didn't know I had fine things for about 2 years after I got home. I was pulling slivers out of my cheek and throat, mostly on the left side, a few on the right, but it all went in the right side. That kind of bothered me. I thought, wait, it's coming out the left side. They're floating around in there somewhere. You know? I had a little test tube. I must have had 6 or 8 of them in there, little pieces that I pulled out with tweezers, and they'd form like a pimple, but they were black, and they'd fester, but it wouldn't go away like something would, you know. And then finally it'd come to a head, and you could get a hold of it and pull them out, you know. I still got a little piece of rock in my finger right here from that thing, you know. I don't know if it happened then or later, but it's always been sitting right there. I asked the lieutenant when I got back to Guam, I said, you know, how come none of us got any medals? And so he went away, and then he came back later, and he said to me, there was nobody left to recommend you for any.
Well,
you know,
the medal story is a strange one.
Yeah, so I would have liked to have that too, you know. And some fellows got medals for carrying ammunition over to Sugarloaf Hill. I said I would have liked it if they could have considered some of us that were using it. While I was in Guadalcanal, they asked me if I wanted to go to officers training, what they call it, OCS.
Canada. Yeah.
And I didn't want to leave my buddies. I knew the operation was imminent, really, and I didn't want to leave my buddies, so I turned them down. One of the fellows that was hit, you mentioned that, one of the fellows that was hit on Okinawa there, and he went back to battalion aid back there, and he felt he wasn't hit that bad, you know, and he's lying in a cot, and they ran out of cots. And somebody came in, and it was wounded pretty bad, and he threw himself off the cot so that they'd put that other fellow on there, and he bled out. He died. I thought that was, you know, he was a kid from Louisiana. His name was Shore. Jeez. I mean, that was noble, but I had another thing that I never figured. As I was on the top of Sugarloaf there, as I was going back up with the BAR, a fella came as I was going back to the top of Sugarloaf with the BAR.
You had a BAR?
The second time, yeah. I had both the BAR and my rifle as I was going back up.
Yeah.
And this fella came down, and he had a machine gun, and he threw it right on the top of the hill. I was as close to him as I am to that girl. And he pulled it back twice, to load, arm it and everything, get it ready. Put his hand on the trigger. He just went like this, just slumped forward. He was dead. I don't know what happened to him. I never saw his body get hit with anything. I couldn't figure that one out at all either. I don't know what happened. I say I was looking right at him while it was going on, and it's just bang. I was going through basic training with an M1 rifle. I broke the record, and that's one of the reasons they took me back as a coach. And for the year, I believe it was 704,000 men went through something like that. And I got a letter from the commandant while I was in Guadalcanal congratulating me for being the best shooter for the whole year, with the M1 rifle. So that was I still have that letter, and it was quite interesting. And what I liked about it is it showed where I'd been, what replacement unit I'd been, and it followed every stop that I made out to San Diego and then to Hawaii and then to Guadalcanal, and it's got a record of that whole path. So it was quite interesting too. I used to shoot quite a bit as a child. I had BB guns and 22s, and I had there was an Army fellow that was teaching some of us who were going into the service, and he taught us how to use the sling and the supports and that sort of thing. And I think he did a good job because while I was being trained at Parris Island, one of the things while you were out at the rifle range, they called it the snapping in, and you'd go out and practice shooting. You weren't shooting, you were just practicing. And this range officer would go by, and he'd stop almost every man and say, do this, do that, do the other. And one day I said to him, you talk to everybody, you never tell me anything. And he says, you must be doing it right, or I'd be telling you. So I think that Army fellow really helped me out a great deal. I had a little basic support there. And he also, if you do pretty well shooting, they gave us some extra shooting, like you could shoot for record several times, not just once. So that again gave you a better opportunity to do that. When I was 17 years old, I was teaching recruits the basic parts of the BAR. That was how I first got to beat it. But I never shot it much. I shot some as we went up to Camp Lejeune. They put us to work, as a replacement unit, and they put us to work helping other people coming through there. And I shot the BAR for record up there and did well with that. And the only other time I shot it, once there was a Jap running as we first got south there. We took the Army positions over, and there was a Jap ran out from underneath there, and I shot a couple times at him, but he ran around the corner. I didn't get him. But I never shot it much, really. But it was a great weapon, I know that. I was assistant BAR man. I carried some of the other fellows' magazines for him. I was happy with the atomic bomb, I'll tell you that, and everybody with me was happy about it too. I say I'm almost sure it saved a lot of lives of ours. We were getting ready to invade Japan there, and I say we actually saw the plans and what beaches you were supposed to hit and everything, and we didn't have to do that. That was good. Many thousands of them right in our area, and the same thing was going on up in Tin Sin and wherever these troops were. But one thing I'll say, when the Emperor told them to surrender, they surrendered. There was no fooling around. There wasn't much trouble, not at all. I've got to say, at the time, while I was in that prison camp and everything, I hated them. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, you'd lost your best friends and everything, and I just hated them. But after the war and everything, it's all over. I got so that I worked with some Japs, and that, in fact, I had a number of ex-Nazis worked in our place. They were hand engravers, very talented people, really. And we had fighter pilots and regular soldiers and all kinds. There must have been about 6 or 7 ex-Nazis came to work for us at our place because of their skills at what they did, you know. And one of them turned out to be one of the best friends I ever had. I couldn't believe it. That he was, you know, for him the war was over too, and he lived in the United States and he loved it. Speaking of the Japanese, I think they've turned into a really good-looking race, you know. I mean, I think they're nice-looking people, and they've grown in stature, I think, from the food and everything they've had since the war and everything, and I think they look good, really. As a general rule, they're nice-looking people. And I don't harbor any bad feelings for them at all anymore, really. So
Yeah,
I say you're a product of your environment, and they believed what they believed, and we believe what we believe. I don't think there was ever really the hatred of the Germans like there was against the Japanese, though, do you? I mean, because at least, say one thing, Japanese never surrendered. We never took any prisoners until the very, very end, you know. And they were, probably most of them were knocked woozy anyhow. But in Germany there, if you surrendered, you were treated somewhat fairly. And in the same way the other way, I think we treated the German prisoners fairly, but with the Japanese and that, it was quite different. They just lost so many second lieutenants. It was unreal. They said they'd get them there, and they couldn't believe how the Japanese could shoot. And all you had to do was stick your head up, and there was one more gone, really. And sometimes sergeants would take over from the lieutenants and tell them to go to hell, and you do what I say, not what he said. So that was something. There's a book written by James Hallis, and it's called Okinawa, the Last Battle of the War, the Battle of Sugarloaf Hill. And I think in one sense I was lucky when I got off of there, because it was still just as bad or worse as it continued, you know. Probably the battle was about a month. We were on there from April until June, but I left in May 15th. I was there 45 days, I think.